Welcome, students. Let's continue our chapter Stars and the Solar System. So far, we have discussed about the Sun and the planets and their satellites, right? Now, let's talk about the other celestial objects that are present in our solar system, like asteroids, comets, meteoroids. So, first of all, let's talk about asteroids. See, students, all of these asteroids, comets, and meteors, these all revolve around the sun, like just like the planets, but they are much smaller than the planets. And the motion of all these is governed by the gravitational force of the sun. And so that is why these are also considered to be the members of the solar system. So we will now describe all these members of solar system in detail. So let's start with asteroids. So asteroids, actually what happens, there's a wide gap between the orbits of the planet Mars and Jupiter. You can see here there's a wide gap in between these two planets, Mars and Jupiter, and a large number of small objects made of rocks are revolving around the sun in this wide gap. You can see here in this picture also. These are called asteroids. So basically, asteroids are the small celestial objects which revolve around the sun between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. And these asteroids are smaller than the planets. In fact, these are called minor planets, and they are made of rocks of various sizes. The biggest asteroid is hundreds of kilometers in diameter, whereas the smallest asteroid is only hundreds of meters in diameter. So there are millions of asteroids which orbit around the sun between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. And each asteroid has its own orbit around the sun, and these asteroids can be seen only through large telescopes. And these are considered the members of the solar system because they revolve around the around the sun, just like the planets do. And astronomers believe that asteroids are the piece of matter or piece of a rock that were formed at the same time as the rest of the planets, which somehow could not assemble, could not join to form a major planet. And what happens sometimes, these orbiting asteroids they collide with one another and break into pieces and form meteorites, which then further give rise to meteors or meteorites. We'll discuss that later. So these asteroids can only be seen through telescopes. Now let's talk about another celestial body, that is comets. Comets are the very small celestial bodies made of gas and dust which revolve around the sun in highly elliptical orbits and become visible only when they come close to the sun. So, students, what happens when the comet reaches the sun, it approaches close to the sun, it develops a long tail. You can see here in the picture, it develops a long tail, glowing tail, and becomes visible to us. So basically it becomes visible on coming close to the sun. Now why it becomes visible at that time and why it develops a tail? Basically the comet, it's made of gas and dust. And so what happens when it comes close to sun rays make its gas glow, and which then separates and form a tail of millions of kilometers long. And the head of this comet, you can see here, the head of the comet is small and appears as a bright ball of light, but yes, its tail is very, very long. And so we can say that comet is actually a collection of gas and dust which appears as a bright ball of light in the sky with a long glowing tail when it comes close to the sun. And one more important thing is that the tail of the comet always points away from the sun. You can see here it always points its tail away from the sun, and the tail grows longer as it comes nearer the sun, but it disappears when the comet moves far away from the sun. And yeah, the comets are smaller than asteroids, and these are distinguished from asteroids by the presence of this long tail, glowing tail. Asteroids do not have any glowing tail. And again, comets are also the members of our solar system. These revolve around the sun just like the planets. And each comet follows its own orbit around the sun. Their orbits are very large and highly elliptical, due to which what happens, they remain very far off from the sun. And most of the time, they are far off and they can be seen very rarely when they come close to the sun. Okay, the period of revolution of comet around the sun is very very large. So if we take an example of a comet like Halley's comet, it has a period of revolution of about 76 years. That is, Halley's comet is seen after every 76 years. So last it was seen in 1986. Now it will be seen after next 76 years. And the comets, they do not last forever, because what happens each time when a comet passes near the sun, as I told you, sun rays makes its gas glow, and what happens, it loses some of its gas, and ultimately only the dust particle is left in space. And when these dust particles enter into an earth's atmosphere, they burn up due to the friction of the atmosphere, due to the air resistance, due to the heat that's produced by air resistance. And what happens, these produce meteors. One more thing is here, that some people think that comets are actually the messengers of disasters, like they are the messengers of war, epidemics, floods. But these are myths, these are superstitions, false beliefs. The appearance of comet is a natural phenomena. It has nothing to do with natural or man-made disaster. Okay, so we should not be afraid of sighting the comet. So far, students, we have discussed asteroids and comets. Now let's discuss the other celestial body, other celestial body that's present in our solar system. That is meteorites. Meteorites are actually the celestial objects which range in size from tiny sand grains to big boulders of several hundred tons. And these meteorites revolve around the sun in their orbit. And these meteorites are mainly left by the disintegration of asteroids and comets. That means when asteroids and comets disintegrate, as we had discussed already in asteroids, that what happens, sometimes the orbiting asteroid collide with one another and they break into tiny pieces and form meteorites. So when asteroids and comets disintegrate, meteoroids are left behind. And these meteorites are smaller, much smaller than asteroids and comets, and they are present throughout the solar system. And again, they are the members of our solar system because they revolve around the sun. And what happens, because of some reason, when these meteoroids break away from its orbit around the sun, they will fall towards the earth and they will become a meteor. That means whenever meteoroids break away from orbit and fall towards earth, it becomes a meteor. So you can say that meteoroid is actually a small body in the solar system that would become a meteor if it entered the Earth's atmosphere. And it is the visible path of a burning meteoroid that enters the Earth's atmosphere, which is called a meteor. So let's talk about meteor. See, students, when the sky is clear and the moon is not there, many times what happens, we see a streak of light in the sky. Mainly during night, we see a streak of light and it disappears within seconds. So that is actually meteor. It is called a meteor or shooting star. So meteors are actually the celestial bodies from the sky which we see as a bright streak of light. You can see here in the picture, it seems like this. So we can see meteor as a bright streak of light that flashes for a moment across the sky and then disappears within seconds. So meteors are commonly called shooting stars. So students, what happens when a meteor enters into the atmosphere of Earth with high speed? A lot of heat is produced due to the resistance of air, and this heat burns the meteor, and the burning meteor is seen in the form of a streak of light shooting down the sky. and it falls on the earth in the form of dust. And meteor, it just lasts for a very short time because tiny rocky piece which it is made, it burns and vaporizes completely in a few seconds due to the excessive heat that's produced by the atmospheric friction. And students, meteor is commonly known as a shooting star, though it is not really a star. But it is called a shooting star because when we view it from the earth, it looks like a streak of starlight shooting across the night sky. So actually, there's a difference between a star and a shooting star. That is, a star has its own light, but shooting star has no light of its own. Light of shooting star is produced when its particles burn on entering the Earth's atmosphere. So, students, as I told you that when meteors enter the Earth's atmosphere, it starts burning. And what happens? Most of the meteors are small and they burn up completely on entering the atmosphere. And then they fall on the earth in the form of dust. But if, however, a meteor is big, then what happens? A part of it may reach the earth's surface without being burned up in the air. And that is known as meteorite. So basically, a meteor which does not burn up completely on entering the Earth's atmosphere and lands on Earth is known as meteorite. So meteorites are a sort of stones falling from the sky, and they fall on the Earth from sky, and their size ranges from small pebbles to big blocks in many tons in weight. Okay, and more than 3,000 meteorites weighing around a kg or more have fallen on the earth each year in different parts of the world. Meteorites are just made of rock or metal, and it's believed they are the pieces of asteroids or comets which somehow strayed away from their orbit around the sun and fell to earth. They are thought to have been formed again at the same time as the planets of the solar system. And by studying the composition of meteorites, scientists can get valuable information about the nature of the material of which the various planets, in fact, including our Earth, are made. And one more thing is here that when the Earth crosses the tail of a comet, swarms of meteors, that means the large number of meteors are seen, and they are known as meteor showers. So, in fact, some meteor showers occur at regular intervals each year. So, basically, at that time, you will see a number of meteors in the sky, shooting stars in the sky.